Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler. How are you, Riley?
It's too hot.
I love it. And Minna Stein. How are you, Minna?
I'm enjoying summer.
I am enjoying summer. It's going to be 99 degrees today. I'm going to enjoy every single one of them. I'm sorry, poor Riley. He'll be sitting inside, but we've got a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of news over the weekend. We've been doing a lot of special podcasts as a result. More are coming. So why don't we kick it off?
After the U.S. joined Israel in striking Iranian nuclear facilities, President Trump stirred controversy by suggesting a possible regime change in Iran, contradicting statements from his own top officials who denied such intentions. Trump's remarks reignited debates over U.S. military involvement abroad, drawing criticism from both Republicans and Democrats concerned about escalating conflict in the Middle East. Iran responded aggressively, threatening severe retaliation, launching missiles, and moving to close the vital Strait of Hormuz, prompting global security warnings and diplomatic outreach to Russia.
This is, of course, quite complicated, and we are devoting a lot of attention to it because this is kind of in our zone, the zone that we were created to address 10 years ago. I think we still are the best place to come for foreign policy and national security analysis on podcasts or on video clips. And so we encourage you, first of all, go listen to the podcast we did yesterday, an excellent podcast with General Mark Hertling, who provided military analysis, Stephen Cook of the Council on Foreign Relations, who provided the geopolitical overlay, and John Wolfstall, of course, who's a nuclear expert, who gave us some insight into what was and was not achievable with these strikes. We'll be doing another special emergency podcast later today with an equally terrific group of people, including David Sanger, our longtime friend, who wrote a piece yesterday in the New York Times. It's really important, and if you haven't seen it, you should, which talks about whether or not Iran's 800 or so kilograms of nuclear material were in any of the places that were bombed, because it's unknown and it appears unlikely. It also appears unlikely that a lot of the people who worked on those things were in those places. And so consequently, even if the multiple deep penetrating weapons that were dropped on Fordo and the other attacks on the other sites that involved over 100 aircraft were successful in destroying buildings, it seems increasingly unlikely that they will be successful in slowing Iran's nuclear program. And in fact, and we discussed this yesterday, we'll discuss it again today, it seems likely that they might actually accelerate the program, because I think it's clear if Iran had nuclear weapons, they wouldn't have been attacked. They know that. They have examples that show that. They have the North Korean example, where they act with a high degree of impunity because they have weapons. They have the Libyan example, where Libya gave up nuclear weapons and ultimately was attacked, did come apart at the seams. They have the Ukraine example, where Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons and became vulnerable to attack because people were less afraid of what might happen attacking them. And the United States and others were afraid of pushing back on Russia when they did it because of their nukes. This war, this attack by Trump, has a lot to dislike about it. Even if you don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, and most people don't, and even if you see the regime in Tehran as the world's largest state sponsor of terror and a bad actor, which they are. The problems with this stem from several factors. First of all, it is hugely unpopular. I saw a poll overnight that 85% of Americans opposed this attack, and only 5% supported it. As somebody said, I think on Blue Sky, chlamydia is more popular than this war. And I think uh, that matters to Trump. Half of his base does not support the United States entering another war. Um, that limits his possibilities in terms of the ability to continue fighting it and so forth. I think Trump thought, well, he could go in, do a big display of force, the Iranians would be cowed, and they would cut a deal. Uh, I think that's unlikely, based on what Riley just said, and the fact that the Iranians, it's a large country, and they can be patient, and this did mobilize some of their supporters, including the Russians, who said maybe they'll supply, or other countries will supply, nuclear weapons to Iran, and that Iran's nuclear program will continue. It was pointed out on our podcast yesterday that the Iranian centrifuges that may or may not have been destroyed are exactly the same type used by the North Koreans, and that the North Koreans could supply Iran with centrifuges to continue or to accelerate their work. So it's possible this was not successful. It's also possible that it could drag on. Trump's suggestion of regime change was idiotic. You don't say those kind of things publicly. It just inflames the situation. But regime change is hard. It takes a long time. We don't want to put boots on the ground. How's it going to be achieved? You think the Israelis can do it? And it's very, very unlikely that they can go and achieve that. Although yesterday, J.D. Vance, in one of the numerous stupid statements he made, said, well, if the Israelis want to take out Ayatollah Khamenei, they can do that. It's on them. It's up to them. But when you look at how this was approached, Trump was against it, then he was for it, then he was against it. There was clearly, despite administration arguments to the contrary, real ambivalence about this. There was clearly very little thought as to what the next stages will be. Trump is not a strategist. Bibi Netanyahu is not a strategist. They're both people who are acting to advance personal interests. Trump, how he appears; Netanyahu, seeking to remain in office. I've addressed this in a column that I wrote at the Daily Beast, and in which I think the headline is something to the effect of "Trump's ego is more dangerous than nukes," and I encourage you to go and read that. But we have no strategy. We have no exit planned. We have no clear goals. We don't have good advisors advising the president. The president doesn't listen to the advisors that he's got. Our ally is completely on their own, out of control, doing whatever they want. And the tasks at hand are really, really difficult. So this is not a good situation. And while I do not think it's going to end in World War III, as some people, say in social media, oh my God, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anything close to that's going to happen. The likelihood of this being a big, protracted mess that actually has the opposite effects that are sought in the short term, or perhaps in the medium term, is very, very high. Furthermore, and finally, Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terror. Their response is far more likely to be terror attacks on soft targets in the Middle East and here, or cyber. And this administration has spent the past 5 months gutting our defenses against terror and cyber. They've taken the resources and sent them to ICE to deal with immigration issues. They put a 22-year-old in charge of counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security, a guy with literally no experience whatsoever. They pulled back a lot of cyber resources because they thought they were targeting the Russians, and Lord knows Donald Trump doesn't want to target the Russians in any regard. So we are more vulnerable than ever, and we just kicked the hornet's nest. So while World War III is not likely, I would say it's a fair bet that we are more at risk today than we were before this happened. Minute.
Senate Republicans unveiled tax legislation with an estimated $441 billion cost using a novel current policy baseline that assumes expiring tax cuts will be extended, dramatically lowering the bill's apparent price from the $3.8 trillion projected under traditional methods. Critics, including Democrats and fiscal watchdogs, argue the new accounting disguises the true cost and undermines budget rules, while Republicans defend it as reflecting economic reality and avoiding future tax hikes. The move sets up a political and procedural clash in the Senate, where the bill's legitimacy under reconciliation rules will be scrutinized and challenged by Democrats.
Yeah, and by the parliamentarian. The reality is this is just cooking the books. There's a reason the tax law was written the way it was, so that these tax increases expire. They're not on the books. If there is no new law, they will disappear. So to pretend that they are on the books just because they want them to stay on the books is nonsense. It's a fiction. It's a cover-up. To enable them to continue forward with giant tax cuts for the super rich that don't benefit the rest of society very much. But I would note that even if you continue the tax cuts, what they're saying is there's even more pork in this thing. There's more fat in it. There's more deficit expansion in it. And that, of course, reveals that this is incredibly fiscally irresponsible, which is, of course, the hallmark of Republicans, who are the ones that increase our national debt every time they come in office. The only ones who have ever produced the balanced budget or actually reduced the debt are the Democrats. That's just a fact. Go look it up. Riley?
This week's NATO summit in The Hague is designed to appease President Trump by adopting a new defense spending goal of 5% of GDP, but his recent military strikes on Iran have introduced unpredictability and tension. The gathering also aims to show unity against Russia, though internal disagreements, such as Spain's refusal to meet the spending target and limited engagement with Ukraine, highlight underlying divisions. European leaders are wary of Trump's soft stance toward Moscow and his pressure for increased European defense spending, fearing U.S. troop withdrawals and weakened collective security. To maintain Trump's support, NATO officials have crafted a short, focused summit statement downplaying contentious topics and limiting direct criticism of Russia.
To maintain Trump's support, they have put together a series of cartoon drawings so that Trump will understand what's going on. No, look, there is only so far NATO can go in placating a member that really doesn't like NATO, doesn't want to be part of NATO, and doesn't agree with the fundamental purposes of NATO. The move by the NATO countries to increase defense spending may be seen as placating Trump, but it's something else. It's also saying we will be ready to defend ourselves if the United States is not a dependable ally anymore. And whereas, there are some differences over Ukraine with Spain, the bigger differences come from the position of the United States, which is openly pro-Russian, pro-Putin. Our ambassador NATO, Matthew Whitaker, the former hot tub salesman, certainly the least qualified person ever to be the ambassador to NATO, indicated this yesterday perhaps it was early today when he said, we deplore the Russian attacks. Both sides need to stop doing things that will escalate this war. We both sides everything in this war, except it's obviously not a both sides proposition. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. Russia seized Crimea illegally. Russia seized Donetsk and Luhansk illegally. Russia has kidnapped tens of thousands of Ukrainian children. Russia has stopped the ability of people who live in Ukraine in the parts that they've captured from speaking Ukrainian. They've taught Russian in the schools. They've changed the history curriculum. They're trying to Russianize these parts of Ukraine. Russia, as recently as the past week, has said that all of Ukraine ought to be theirs. Russia obviously invaded several years ago with even more troops, taking this 10-year-old war to a new level. And Russia has been the ones committing war crimes. Russia is the one abetted in this conflict by North Korean soldiers and other soldiers of fortune because they've sustained such terrible blows. The vast majority of Europeans realize this and acknowledge it because they are next on the menu for Russia. And America's position puts them at greater risk. It'll be interesting to see how the Americans manage this, whether they're able to manage it, what kinds of fissures exist within NATO. As you know, Trump has in the past talked about pulling the United States out of NATO altogether. Trump's much weaker now than he was a few months ago. His polls are down. Virtually everything he's doing is proving to be unsuccessful. So it'll be interesting to see whether he's as brazen as he has been in the past. But we do have a clue, because just a week ago he was at the G7 summit in Canada pitching Russia as a member and then ditching the summit when he felt like things were not going his way. Let's watch for this in the week ahead.
A federal judge in Tennessee ruled that the Justice Department failed to justify holding Kilmar Garcia in pretrial detention, criticizing the government's reliance on weak or hearsay evidence and unproven gang ties. Despite the ruling, Garcia, accused of smuggling undocumented immigrants across state lines, will likely remain in immigration custody due to separate detention powers. His mistaken deportation earlier this year sparked a political and legal clash over due process, as his defense argues the government violated his rights and mishandled his return to the U.S.
Well, look, they violated his rights. He was sent outside the United States without due process. They violated everybody's rights. And I think we need to remember that's the case. Is this a good guy? Is this a bad guy? Is this a guy who committed crimes? We don't know. Our system is designed to review his case, to review the facts, and to act based on the facts. Trump and Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan don't want to do that. They just want to identify people, which they do primarily on the basis of their color or the language they speak, and send them out of the country, no matter what. And we saw this weekend hideous images of American citizens, of, in one case, a longstanding member of the community who had 3 sons in the United States Marine, manhandled, beaten, mistreated by this effective Gestapo that the ICE, the masked, unidentified ICE thugs have become. I think there's a broad consensus in America that we should enforce our laws. But that doesn't just mean deporting people who are here illegally and who are committing crimes. It also means giving everybody due process as is required by our Constitution. That is not happening. And the Abrego Garcia case is about that. It's not really about whether he's guilty or not. If he's guilty, they should handle him consistent with the law. But it's a good thing that he is being treated properly, just like it is a good thing that some of these people who have been illegally detained are finally being freed. And it's good to see the courts work on this, and I hope that continues. I should add that over the next week, we are expecting 10 Supreme Court decisions, one of which is on the Trump administration's assertion that if you're here illegally, if you're born in the United States as the child of illegal immigrants, you are not entitled to birthright citizenship. That's completely inconsistent with the law, the wording within the Constitution. But this Supreme Court has shocked us in the past. So that's another thing to watch for in the week ahead.
Well, finishing with the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court is nearing the end of a term marked by emergency appeals from the Trump administration, including a case on denying birthright citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants, as you mentioned.
Well, see, there it is.
Among the major remaining cases are challenges to nationwide injunctions, a religious rights dispute over LGBTQ-themed books in Maryland schools, and a Louisiana redistricting battle involving the Voting Rights Act. The court is also weighing a Texas law requiring age verification for online pornography, raising concerns about free speech and privacy. With significant rulings pending, the justices aim to conclude their work by the end of June, navigating politically charged issues with national impact.
Navigating is nice. I mean, or steamrolling through the issues. We shall see. But as we said, we'll cover it. We'll bring in some legal experts to provide more perspective on that, because that's what we do here. We take the news that we think is important, and on our other podcasts, we bring in experts and enable them to do deeper dives into these things than you'll find if you watch them on TV networks that will go unnamed, like CNN or MSNBC. I assume that you're not watching Fox or some of those other crazier networks, because if you were, you probably wouldn't be listening to something called the DSR Network that has a podcast called Deep State Radio, or maybe you're waiting for the Deep State to out themselves. Except the reason we named it Deep State Radio 10 years ago was kind of tongue in cheek. In any event, we're glad you joined us. There's obviously a lot going on this week. We're going to have a lot of special programming. So keep an eye out for that. And if you want to support what we're doing, and that would be super helpful to what we're doing here, go to the DSR Network, click on membership, and sign up for, less than somebody I saw over the weekend was saying a mocha latte costs $9. It's way less than that per month. I don't even know what a mocha latte is. What is a mocha latte? Neither.
It's
good.
Like chocolatey coffee.
No, really? Oh yeah, mocha, right? See, I said mocha, but I was thinking matcha.
Matcha's
Which of course
too.
You like matcha. You were wearing kind of a matcha colored shirt today, brother.
I had a matcha this morning. It's a very matcha day for me.
Very matcha.
Good summer drink.
We actually had matcha. There's a big Asian community very near where we live, and we went to the downtown area where every restaurant and every little fast food place is some Asian specialty, and we went to a place that does matcha ice cream and boba tea, right?
Yeah,
and
it's a good combo.
Sounds delicious.
It was super popular place. Anyway, why are we talking about this? Because the other big story right now, if you're on the East Coast of the United States, is it's going to be 99 degrees today, 99 degrees tomorrow. And if you walk slowly on the sidewalk, you could burst into flame by a spontaneous combustion. So my advice, do not wear flammable clothing. Also, stay cool, hydrate, sunscreen. And we'll be back tomorrow. Bye.